It says we're going live. If I can get somebody here to help me check if we are live, I want to go into my personal YouTube channel. But I do appreciate everybody for tuning in for a live edition of the Rice Report. And today I am joined by Lynette Zang. Lynette is no stranger to the show. She's been on the show several times, actually. Let me minimize my volume there. It looks like we are good to go. Looks like everything sounds good. So Lynette, I appreciate you coming on the show. You've been on so many times that I don't really feel like we need to go through all the normal formalities. I've created a playlist with all the previous interviews that you come on and done with me before, and I encourage people to check those out. And but Lynette, you are the chief market analyst for ITM Trading, and again, you are no stranger to the show. So thank you for coming on. How are you doing today?
Well, it's always great to be here, Chris. So thank you for having me. And you're trying a new thing, and I always love that. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm using StreamYard, and I'm definitely recommending it to others. We had a little bit of a hiccup because I might have sent you the wrong invite link, but ultimately everything worked out. And here we are, and we're live. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I know you've been talking a lot about the digital dollar and banking for all. And I was watching one of your videos on Monday or Tuesday, and I thought it was really funny because you said, coming up, I'll be on Chris Rice Crypto show. And I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I imagine it would be the digital dollar. And I'm like, well, she obviously knows me very well.
You think?
A little bit. And well, that's what's important, I think, too, like with where I've been coming from. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just got something from Megan saying that you look blurry, and I see that too, but I'm not really sure why. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Maybe it helps hide any wrinkles.
I'm not sure if it's a focus. I'm not sure if it's a focus on that end or not. I don't think. It's
clear on our camera.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what I can do. I apologize. I apologize if you look blurry, Lynette. I really do.
Oh, that's okay. That's
just one of these kinks I want to have to work out with this program, but I've heard such great things. But what I was going to say was, since I've been involved in cryptocurrency, and I know that some of the people at ITM Trading aren't huge fans of crypto, mm-hmm. but I think it's important now that someone like myself is here because I'm trying to promote decentralization. And decentralization, I mean, as you have said, we're going into a digital age. We can't, it's not going to be anything that we can avoid. Mm-hmm. And with that being said, it's going to be centralized. It's going to be controlled. And we need to have another option. And we need to have people out there letting people know about the power of decentralization. And that's the reason why I got involved in cryptocurrency from the get-go. Because I mean, I've always been a proponent of precious metals, gold and silver, and just include the cryptocurrencies with the precious metals in my personal equation. And here we are going into the digital age.
Of course we are. And, you know, if the central banks have their way, it will be absolutely centralized under their power. So the guys that got us into this mess remain in control on the other side of this mess to get us into another mess. And we're not done yet. I mean, we're not even marginally done.
No, we're not. We're not. And what I wanted to ask you, because I've been looking into so many things, I haven't been able to really spend a lot of time looking into the details of the Banking for All Act. And from what I understand, it's passed Senate, or it's been introduced. Has it passed anything? Okay. So
no, it has not passed anything yet, but they did put a date in for completion, and that was January 1st of 2021.
Right, which we're looking at like what, a little over 4 months away.
Exactly. So I don't know whether or not it's going to be passed, but you can definitely see the direction that they're taking us in.
And if you look at what's going on with the post office and stuff like that, with the voting, blockchain voting, and all the issues with the mail delivery, it definitely seems like we're going to be pushed in this direction. And I think that the catalyst to it will be the second wave and pushing that cashless society, getting rid of just that dirty fiat that we touch that has so many germs and can spread different things to each other. So I definitely see where this is going. What I found interesting is just it's very open-ended. It doesn't really specify a lot of things and clarify. It just kind of gives a generalization with some things. But I do know that
That leaves them flexibility, doesn't it?
Right. It does. It does.
You
And
know, they
people
do
just
that
don't
with
realize
all of
that.
the laws.
I know. But this right here is an important one because as you have mentioned, not only are they going to try to basically enact banking for everybody, because there are a considerable amount of population in the United States that are considered the unbanked, that don't have bank accounts. And now the Federal Reserve is going to step in and offer everybody bank accounts.
Yep.
But
Fed accounts.
Right. And the thing that people aren't realizing is how we're going to lose complete privacy when it comes to our money.
And control.
Complete surveillance, control, trackability, everything. I mean, if they could essentially say that certain services and goods, they don't even want you to spend the money on and try to push them out of the system. You know, I mean, they can essentially block payments. It's really crazy when you think about where that's headed, and the fact that people are just, I mean, I understand what's going on, but people are trying to pay attention to everything that's going on around them in the world, you know, considering everything from a virus to police brutality to riots and protests. You know, it's crazy.
Well, I think I'm a little older than you, but this
are.
feels like it. Anybody that's my age, I'm almost 66 actually. So anybody that's my age or in that vicinity will, I'm certain, recognize the energy levels from the 60s and the 70s to the same kind of energy levels that we're feeling today. We are definitely in a huge reset. And I mean, it would be hard for me to imagine that anybody can't see it, smell it, feel it, taste it. But it's just a way for you. Look over there while we're doing this over here and justifying going digital, because we had this morning another spike in initial unemployment claims. Back over 1 million.
Didn't we just have all-time highs in S&P though too?
Yes, indeed we did.
At the same time. Which shouldn't even be said in the same sentence at all.
No. Well, there's definitely a decoupling between Wall Street reality and Main Street reality. Yeah. And a lot of what is really happening in there, and this is not something that's new. This is actually something that's been happening for a long time. But it is the complete destruction of Main Street as Wall Street, or the few like, you know, Apple, Amazon, Google. They take over everything that Main Street was doing, but they do it with, you know, technology. I mean, I saw it. Look, you had Amazon who had losses for as far as the eye could see, as they would go into one sector and undercut and take over and destroy mom and pop businesses, or force them to work with them, which is really what ended up happening. You either die or you work with us. Then taking all of the data and the information that they learned about these companies, and then coming out with their own products and undercutting their vendors. There's a lawsuit that's going on right now, but you know, Wall Street didn't care. They still funneled the money in, and Jeff Bezos is, I think, arguably, or he is the wealthiest person on the planet now. And there's been an awful lot of destruction in its wake, and we're seeing the same thing right now, where Wall Street has access to the capital markets, so they can get money, and they can get it really super cheap. You had, what was it, Ball Corp, that is a junk rated company, recently come out with a bond below a 3% yield for junk, a 10-year bond, junk. You know, we've got zombie corporations all over the place, but they have access to generate cash through Wall Street. Main Street, different story. They don't have the access to that kind of cash. So, and the devastation that's happened with the coronavirus pandemic,
right?
You know,
I mean, anybody with the brain knows that this wasn't the timing of this thing was too suspicious. I mean, we talked about that.
Well, yeah. And not only that, but you can go to the Wuhan lab site and read their papers on it. They knew it. Fauci was part of it, developing this superbug. They knew that it was going to go from animals to human. I mean, there's a beautiful spreadsheet, flowchart on how that would happen. And so while they were creating the superbug, I mean, I can't say that anybody released it because that is not something that I can prove.
Right. But
they knew about it.
When was this Banking for All Act introduced? Do you know that?
March. I think it was March 19th of this year.
Okay, because I thought it was January. That's the reason why I was asking, because I thought the date was...
No, it was March.
Okay. I thought, for some reason, I thought it was January. And when you mentioned the 70s, what's really odd about when you said that, and I'm sure you followed this, Paul Tudor Jones, who was big in the 70s with the gold movement, I would kind of refer, that's maybe what you're referring to is, the vibe, the feeling is kind of that same vibe that people had in the gold movement back then. And Paul Tudor Jones said that what's going on now, especially with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, is really reminding him of the 70s. And so he, as having wealth, I think of 35 million, maybe I'm modest in that, maybe, or billion, 35 billion. He's taking like 1 to 2% of his holdings and putting it into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, which is a huge thing if you think about that. And if you get more people like Paul Tudor Jones having that same mentality, just based off the Federal Reserve and what the Federal Reserve is doing by printing the US dollar into oblivion and pushing us into higher forms of inflation and pushing us into hyperinflation, these smart people are looking to hedge their wealth and they want to make sure they can keep what they got. And they are using Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as a way to do that. And that's where like that power of decentralization comes in. But one of the things I really wanted to get some clarification on that maybe you could probably help out with, because you're such an excellent analyst at these things. What type of laws are they trying to introduce right now to change money or currency and the way that we use it today? What are they trying? Because I know that they're trying to change laws with the way that we do things. How is this playing out?
Well, they've been this isn't something that they suddenly started. It was really after 2008. And, people think, well, that was 2008. Now we're in 2020. No, this is just an extension of that because the whole system died and they knew at that point. I mean, when you think about the tool that central banks have to control the rate and speed of inflation, it's interest rates. So if you're anchored at 0, it's kind of hard to lower them. They tested it, didn't really do what they wanted. So they've been really shifting us that in direction, but they don't really need to change any laws. They just need to implement a plan. And one of my very favorite pieces, and something I talk about all the time, is the IMF working paper on breaking below the lower zero bound, because they laid out, first of all, a beautiful flow chart. In the next crisis, within weeks, we can implement volunteering cash. So they don't want to change the laws. They want you to volunteer, because then you think, just like a lot of people that ended up in bankruptcy, a lot of businesses ended up in bankruptcy. Well, what they do, they blamed themselves. It wasn't themselves. I'm not saying that they necessarily made all the best choices, but this has been coming, thank you, Amazon and others, for a very long time. And the reset into a new currency, if they had to change laws, then it would make it more visible for you. So the Banking for All Act, where they can now say, well, we're doing this because we want to make sure that everybody can pay their rent and buy food. So if everybody has this Fed account, the Fed just funds it, right? Puts money in there. And look at this, you can go spend it. But they need us to be desperate enough to actually accept that. And thank you, coronavirus, because that's really what's justifying it. And even though we have 4 months left, I felt this from the beginning. I started talking about it. I definitely see that we will have a universal basic income plan. And I think, I was saying that I was thinking that it would happen before the end of this year, but I think that's what the Banking for All Act is about, is to easily enable that. So they are changing some things.
The UBI thing is,
it may or may not pass. I mean, I can't guarantee that one way or the other, but yeah.
Well, it seems like there's more corrupt politicians than there are good politicians. So it does seem like it would be going in that direction. And with all the implementation that they're planning involving the post office and ensuring that every single bank has a backdoor for this, that no matter what the cost is to the bank, that they have to keep these accounts open. There's too much detail going into this to know that that is not going to happen. They kind of were pushing this in previous bills, the beginning of this year as well, introducing the digital dollar and things like that, which is really interesting, especially when you start doing some research. And this is some research I'd like to share for you and send you down an interesting rabbit hole that's completely involved in the cryptocurrency element, but ties back completely to the legacy financial system. And that goes back to Steve Mnuchin, who used to work with Goldman Sachs. And then he went on to form One West Bank. He was working there with Joseph Otting and a guy named Brian Brooks. When Mnuchin was, and I call them the One West gang. When Mnuchin made his way to the head of the Treasury, and then he brought on Joseph Otting as the comptroller of our currency. Then what happened was, and at the time they were talking about putting Brian Brooks in that position, but Brian Brooks ended up taking a position as the chief legal officer at Coinbase. And Coinbase is the easiest exchange for people to get involved with cryptocurrencies. They were even trying to get banking and things like that. But what happened was Brian Brooks goes and works for Coinbase, and he starts to help develop a stable coin called USDC. And USDC it's audited, it's backed one by one. So, I mean, it's legitimate for what it is, for being a cryptocurrency that represents the US dollar stable value. And the interesting thing is, the company that originally came up with it was Circle Invest, and they partnered up with Coinbase to develop it further. Well, the company that owns Circle Invest, or invested heavily in Circle Invest, is Goldman Sachs. So it ties back around. And then Brian Brooks leaves Coinbase, but before he leaves Coinbase, he's doing a bunch of press interviews and stuff, talking about how the civil sector, or the private sector, needs to come up with these technologies, and the government needs to regulate. And then within a few months, he's named the comptroller of currency, Brian Brooks. So he was a chief legal officer at Coinbase. Now he's at the Treasury. And so you got the One West gang back together, Joseph Otting, Brian Brooks, and Steve Mnuchin. And then they brought in, I can't remember her name, but the lady who's a politician that was involved with ICE and backed the Intercontinental Exchange. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know who she is, though. I don't
Kelly Loeffler. I don't know if that's the right name, but she got brought on. Trump had brought her on. I guess she's going to be either advising Trump or going to be involved with the Treasury as well. So he's bringing all these interesting people into the fold. And even Backed has mentioned that they're going to be having a digital wallet that's probably going to be incorporated to work with, in conjunction with, what the Fed system that they're creating. Do you think any of this stuff is relating back to the idea? And I'm sure you've heard about the quantum financial system, a new replacement for the banking system. Do you think that this would also create this quantum financial system that would essentially be a parallel system to make the old legacy system obsolete, to get rid of the LIBOR rate and all the different things that we're going to be facing?
I think that is probably very good. I mean, they've been working on the reset for a while, so that actually makes all the sense in the world, because they need a system to take over. So I think that's, a possibility, and I will jump down that rabbit hole.
It's an interesting one when you think about it. When you think about all the people that are involved at the Treasury, and because I really think that there's going to be a lot of cooperation within the cryptocurrency space. Ethereum, there's people within the Ethereum blockchain, within the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, that are working on smart contracts to replace the SWIFT system that are working on
Yes.
central bank digital currencies. There's actually a new token standard that was created that's very SEC friendly. It's called ERC 1404, and it can be frozen. It's basically like a security token, but it can be completely frozen and such. So I mean, it's kind of an interesting rabbit hole. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
I'm going to turn the tables on you a little
Sure.
bit, because, you know, this is a very interesting rabbit hole. How easily do you think that the system will give up control to a decentralized system?
Never. They won't. They won't. But here's the beautiful thing, Lynette. Yeah. We're at a very interesting time in history, and I think revolution is in the air. And when enough people take a stand, nothing can stand against the people. So when we decide that we're going to stand together, united against this tyranny and injustice, that tyranny and injustice cannot stand. And that's what I'm trying to do now. Is trying to wake people up, trying to build strength in numbers.
Right.
You know, I mean, I put out a video yesterday, John F. Kennedy's inaugural speech in 1961. He says, "We dare not forget that we are the heirs of that first revolution, the Revolutionary War. We have a responsibility as Americans."
Yeah, we do.
And our country is going down the shitter, is the nicest way to put it. And, you know, we need to do something to change that before we turn into that George Orwell 1984 world, or if people don't make a stand now and start doing things proactive, you know, individually and then together, then we're going to be trapped in a system, and there's nothing we're going to be able to do. So it's like the time really is truly now.
It really is, because if not now, when? And if not who? You know, if not you, who? And we do need to come together. And I'm getting goosebumps, you know, when I'm saying this, because I agree with you 100% that there needs to be some level of revolution, and a big, strong level of revolution, so that the guys that took advantage of us, I mean, this next piece is about attacking principle, right? It wasn't just attacking your purchasing power. That's all gone. That's all gone. Yeah. Now it's about complete control. And that's what has me really concerned. And actually, that's why, you know, I mean,
it's alarming.
It's very alarming. For me, that's why being as absolutely independent and self-sufficient at the same time, building that community so that we can come together, because we are a lot more powerful together than we are separately. And we don't have to absolutely 100% agree on everything to come together in community.
I agree.
I think that where you and I are the same is we believe that people need to have choices.
It's a common bond. And when people can find that common bond to unite, and there's many things that can unite people. I've seen the most racist black and white guy become the best of friends because they like cigars. They had a conversation because somebody smelled a cigar, and these two racist people love each other to death, but they hate the rest of the races on the other end. But it's the power of that common bond. And as you can see we're talking about manipulation in the financial system. But then, you know, when you look at the bigger picture, we've got the manipulation, the conditioning happening at the public school level, in the media, on the news. It's insane. Like kind of almost as if you're taking the Nazi philosophy and propaganda and reapplying that. And it was really almost as if the Nazis, not Hitler, but the Nazi party, won World War II and infiltrated the rest of the world, because they've actually passed laws in the United States that allows the government to do propaganda on the Americans.
Oh, yeah. No, there was a huge push in the early 80s when Rupert Murdoch, when President Reagan, changed the laws and rules allowing Rupert Murdoch to come over to this country and own a larger percentage of the media. And then they formalized perception management program where they can manage your perception.
Yep.
And, you know, in this regard too, China makes me really nervous, because China is showing everybody how to create a totalitarian surveillance system.
It's like, hey, we've done it. Now you can replicate it. And that,
Exactly.
yeah, I'm worried about that because I've heard things about the New York Police Department thinking about adding in the facial recognition to help them with their crime and things like that. And it's like, even when you look into the things in China, there's a company in China that actually calls their what they do Skynet, which is from the Terminator movie, which is the AI that takes over the entire planet. And they're calling it that.
Yeah, it's hiding in plain sight. It's incredible.
It's truly scary. And I mean, that's where I think that we're at this pivotal time. And you may not even realize it, Lynette. All the stuff that you talked about with surviving and thriving is really a recipe for what we need to do to be independent. And,
yes.
And so when I say a revolution, I want to clarify that I'm not trying to encourage violence or anything. Right. These things can be done bloodlessly.
Yes.
It just takes people to stand up in love. And we can love the government out of existence, and we can love the world into change. So it's a powerful thing when you think about that. I just don't want people to get misconstrued. And I'm like, form your militia and go attack the White House. You know, right. That's not the mentality that I'm coming at all. Like we need to be civilized people and come at this in a civilized manner, because we're dealing with an archaic system that when you really study this, it goes way, 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 way back in history.
Way back.
You know, I mean, I was trying to figure out what encaptured us into this system. You know, like what were the laws and how did this? And I've been going back to like Roman stuff, and even prior to that, but anything from the AD time. There's an emperor named Justinian who came up with corpus juris, which is a law system. It means in Latin body of law or law of the dead, depending on how you want to look at it. But it places us under a maritime law system. Mm-hmm. When the Magna Carta came out, it was trying to put us back into common law, the law of the land. And then not too long after that, another Roman juror who perfected the corpus juris encapsulated everybody back into the maritime system by using surnames. Because if you remember back in history, people didn't used to use surnames. It was the surname thing that started really capturing us into this. And then the birth certificate system. I don't know how much you've looked into corporate entities or even what the word corporation means in Latin, but it's a dead body. It's really interesting when you start looking into Black Law's dictionary and start looking into the Oxford and Chicago Styles manuals and start understanding that the court systems that we have all around the world, but especially here in the United States, operate under a completely different language than we communicate. It sounds like the same language that we talk about, but the words mean different things in that particular place. And that's really alarming when you think about that. So, I mean, I've been really on this path, and I thought talking about the digital dollar and the fact that if these things happen, we're going to lose the privacy. The Banking for All Act sounds like it's a good thing. And when you just hear about some of the highlights of it, but ultimately it's a bad thing. And there's things that we need to do as individuals to wake each other up, to bring attention, because at the very minimum, contact your politicians, your elected officials, and tell them what you want them to do, because that's the whole point in an elected official, is elected officials are supposed to represent our vote. But now that we've gotten in this awesome age of technology, and if you haven't looked at it, I'll send you the patent information from the USPS with their blockchain voting system. I'm trying to have some cypherpunks and coders go through and look at the code. But the idea of blockchain voting, especially in a decentralized manner, where we have a cryptographic token that is based off of our individual identity. So that it can't be replicated, can't be duplicated, can't be manipulated, and our vote counts. If we were to do this, we could literally replace congressmen with smart contracts, automate Congress and Senate, and let us have a voice like we're supposed to have, which is what our founding fathers would want us to do. It was just so hard to do that because we didn't have the internet back then. We had this archaic mail system with land delivery and sea delivery. It was hard to get the information flow out to people in a timely manner. And now we're at this point in history. We don't need these archaic ways that we keep living. Like, we're talking about advancing and changing the world. Let's change some of these systems that we use.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to like get off there on a rant. I've just been in this.
No, Gerald Celente also brings that particular point up, is that we don't really need the system that we have right now. With our vote really doesn't count. I mean, it's the electoral college that actually votes for the president. But we could, with the blockchain and the technology, we could actually have a vote that counts. And I think that that's one good use for the new technology, actually.
It is. And I mean, just so you know, I mean, you can use blockchain technology without cryptocurrencies, but you really can't use the cryptocurrencies without the blockchain technology. So the blockchain is just an open ledger. And so if you think about that, it's debits and credits. And you could think of voting as being debits and credits, or, you know, one side or the other. So, I mean, it really has that potentiality. The blockchain technology can disrupt and change a lot of the industries that are controlled and manipulated by small groups of people and monopolies. The music industry is a great example. I mean, it really just gives it the power back to the artist, because I'm a former musician. And if you sign a record deal, you're not really making money unless you sell a lot of singles or albums or something to that effect. Otherwise, you're really struggling, and you have to sell a lot, because getting a record deal is just essentially getting a loan and you're paying it back. And so, I mean, that's why I've been really adamant about keeping our relationship open and trying to keep you open-minded to the ideas of decentralization, because I knew we were headed in this direction. And I knew that we needed to, because this is a tool, just like a gun. It could be used to protect and defend, or it could be offensive and used to hurt people. So we need more people in this world to let this tool be used for the greater good and for the best possible purposes they can, and not to control and manipulate us.
Well, I can't argue with that. I 100% agree with you, Chris. And I was always open to coming on to your channel, because first of all, you learn from everybody, but we're together in the community. We are in this community. And so, you know, no infighting. We need to come together and figure it out and band together, because there is power in numbers. There is. Absolutely. And there are more of us than there are of them.
If we could not be divided, but, you know, we're letting the mainstream media and the news and stuff keep us divided. And that's what we need to do, is like start showing that we don't need to be divided, that we're really not as divided as the media is making us out to be, and that we need to stand together. And that there's a reason why they say, united we stand, divided we fall.
Right.
And right now we're divided. And I think, you know, and I value your time. I respect your work. Even though we do disagree on some things, on some levels, it's not to the effect that it's going to hurt who we are in our relationship, because we have those common bonds. And you've taught me an immense amount when I started looking and getting heavily involved in economics. So you mentioned Gerald Celente, and I've tried to interview him. I basically was told I didn't have enough subscribers at the time to have him on. I've tried to get Manarino on. I haven't really got a response from him. I figure we could have a really good conversation as well, because I'm trying to learn from as many people and connect as many of our community together, because we all have that same, the people who are in the gold, silver, bug, precious metals market, that whole scene has the same goals and mentality that the people in the decentralized cryptocurrency community have, but they're divided because they don't agree on each other's choices.
Right.
And it's like, if you could just see past that.
I mean, honestly, whatever tool that we can have in a decentralized system, I mean, that's what gold and silver is. It's a decentralized system. The challenge is that there's really a finite amount of it. So
well, for now, until Elon Musk gets us on asteroids.
Right. Good. But, you know, so, I mean, I can see a place for it where I go with the current cryptocurrencies is that I don't see that central banks will allow them. That is a big war. So,
it will be. Once they get the digital dollar out and going, they're going to try to make Bitcoin like it's dirty money. Anything decentralized that they can't control, they're going to make it like it's criminals. And honestly, any criminal using Bitcoin to do something is really not a very smart individual, because it's completely traceable. It's not anonymous, it's pseudo anonymous, and there's chain analysis tools that can trace you back to your IP address. They can figure out who you are. There are better cryptocurrencies that are designed for privacy and anonymity that you cannot trace. So, and you know, I may eventually have to go that route, because it may get to a point that the cryptocurrencies that I support are going to be considered kind of like outlaw and dirty and underground, and shouldn't be used. And as much as I love cryptocurrency, I cannot stress people enough. I will never, ever sign on for a cashless society and a digital dollar, a digital society completely. Like there is that just, it doesn't gel well with me. Even if it just was to allow us to legalize gold and silver as a tender, so that we can choose to just use precious metals instead of using their system, as, you know, it gave us something, because they could take that silver and put it back into the system or whatever. But I just do not like the idea of cashless society. And one of the last things I wanted to ask you about before we talk about ITM is getting an idea from you in regards to your thoughts if you've looked into the digital ID. I know this doesn't normally play into your area, but with everything else happening.
I actually have not looked at that deeply, but I know that if they can hold everything digital and title to everything digital, then that gives them a whole lot more control, even in their perception management.
Yeah.
And then you're to take away our wealth, our freedoms, our choices, everything.
It's crazy
so
when you think
I will never sign on for a purely digital system either.
I don't know what the ID is called, or Real ID, I think is the ID that they're now implementing here. So imagine you're going to have the Real ID put into a digital form. So you're not going to be able to do anything that's going to require an ID if you don't comply with all the different things that they're going to. So whereas Donald Trump, who I'm not pro or against, is saying he would like to make it a choice for Americans to take a vaccine or something to that effect. The problem with that is, I think it's like, yeah, we're going to give you a choice to take it, but if you don't take it, you're not going to be able to participate in anything. So there's your choice. Do you want to just be excluded, or do you want to be a part of everybody else? Because if you're going to be a part of everybody else, you got to play by the rules and you got to take the vaccine.
Well, you know, that's what they did with the TSA. 2 days before Thanksgiving, the most highly traveled day of the year, that's when they put it in. And at that point, we did have a choice. We could have said no. We could have turned around and walked out. And guess what would not have happened? So yeah, they'll make it a choice. They'll make you volunteer. They always want you to volunteer. I'm not volunteering. I mean, I love to travel, but I don't know if I have to get a chip or a vaccine in order to travel. Probably not going to be doing much traveling, to be perfectly honest with you, because I can't guarantee it at this moment, but I can pretty much guarantee that that's not a choice that I would make. But, you know, when you talk about the Real ID here in Arizona, I'll have to look at the license, but all of a sudden they canceled everybody's license past a certain point, and then you had to get this special Real ID license, and you can't travel unless you have this. Like a passport doesn't actually work for this. So they do force it on you, and then it's just kind of laying and waiting until the time when you're ensnared. You know, how do you catch a wild pig? Slowly, one side at a time. And then what are you going to do about it?
I mean, you could tell that the people involved in this transfer and things that are happening and all the manipulation, they're very, very patient.
You have to be.
I mean, they came up with a plan over 107 years ago, that 1913, about 107 years ago, that is taken this long. Took to 71, then to 71 to 2020 roughly, for things to really kind of play out in the way that they wanted them to play out. But that would mean that some of the people that came up with this plan aren't even alive to see it actually be enacted. So
Right.
it's crazy when you think about that. And I mean, that's the other thing I wanted to say is, because I've talked to other people in regards to you, and a lot of people have a lot of respect for what you do. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom, and I appreciate you taking a lot of your personal time and basically researching so that you can provide this information for everybody. So I mean, I can't thank you enough for the things that you've taught me and the things that you're continuing to do. And, you know, it's an honor for me to be able to have these conversations with you. I know we've become friends, but it's truly an honor to be able just to sit and talk with you, because I really respect a lot of what you've been doing.
You know, honestly, Chris, I do believe that every single person on this planet, their responsibility is to share the gifts that they've been given. And, you know, I've been groomed for this moment in time, you know, as a stockbroker, as a banker, with my Uncle Al, within the hard, tangible areas, knowing how everything, I mean, I've just been groomed for this. And my responsibility is to share. So I appreciate that. I really do. But I'm just living what I'm supposed to be doing, just like you are. We are here to share the gifts that we've been given, and I'm very grateful. And I'm very grateful when I get to do it. And if I can help one person, I'm very grateful for that too.
Well, you definitely helped me. So you've done, and I'm sure I've helped others. So I would say that you've done, your mission is complete. And since you like helping people, well, I wouldn't say complete, but
I am living my mission. And I just, you know, the only guarantee that I can give is that I will show up and I will do the work, and I'll do the best that I can. And that's all anybody can ever do, really.
Amen to that. I mean, that's really all the best we can do. And I love your motto, especially your new motto that you've been saying, cover your assets. I really love that, especially when you slow it down. You say, cover your assets.
Exactly.
I like that. So
that's what we need to do.
You're the chief market analyst at ITM Trading, which is a precious metals specialist. You want to tell everybody how you can help them out, what you guys do over there?
Well, absolutely. You know, I've been studying currencies since 1987, and there are repeatable patterns. So I created a strategy for myself, because, you know, what's happening is inevitable. And if you know what to look for, you study history, you can see this pattern unfolding. And we at ITM Trading, we only deal with physical metals, so physical gold and physical silver and all different kinds. And the strategy that we execute there is based on my personal strategy, but then tweaked and customized for each individual person, because we're all in different circumstances and we all have different goals. So that's what we really love to do there. And, you know, I also have my mantra: food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. These are things that we need to have a nice standard of living, regardless of what's happening out in the economy. There are different things that you have to prepare for. So, you know, the mantra, I think, is really important, because you really do need to be as self-sufficient as possible. And you know, I'd also like to say that we've gotten a little taste of this. What happened in March, I mean, that's not over yet.
It's going to come back, I think.
It didn't go away. You're still looking at prices spiking enormously because the food chain is so broken. And so, but for me, I'm walking around my urban farm going, thank goodness, thank goodness. And by the way, I was able to share a lot of toilet paper. And this over the years too.
You were giving it to neighbors, weren't you?
Absolutely. I mean, Jacqueline, you know, my COO, she was just about in tears because she couldn't get toilet paper. I said, this is not a problem. Here's a bunch of toilet paper. When you need more, let me know. So, and that's part of the community piece too. So at ITM, we really are a family, and we really are a community. but we like to help you create a plan so that you can walk through this reset. And I really do hope that everybody recognizes that the reset has already begun. It's a total reset, not just of the financial system, but of the social system as well. I mean, the World Economic Forum, that's their title, the Great Reset.
It's a reset of everything. It's literally. It's just so much, and they're breaking it up, and then they're keeping people blinded to what's going on with all the crap that's happening around the world that seems to be instigated and possibly planned. So it's just
exactly.
It's crazy.
You know, look over here, and we're changing everything over here. You know,
I get it. One thing, I was hearing something about this in April-ish, maybe late March, April-ish, maybe a little bit later, about shortages in silver and gold. Like where are we standing now? Because I don't really hear you mention that very often. Like, how is the supply?
That's a similar thing, not as intense as it was in March and April, but we all, again, are seeing shortages in some forms of gold and silver, and we're definitely seeing premiums start to rise again. So, you know, if people think, oh, well, you know, I have time because I can buy it whenever I want. No, you really can't. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't buy gold and silver, but the price that you're going to have to pay,
is outrageous.
It could be completely different than Wall Street's spot prices, which are contracts. And that's the other piece of that that's happening when you're talking about shortages, because typically these contracts are just designed to roll over. It's just traders wanting to make a quick buck and rolling the contract over from 1 month to the next month, etc. But lately, they have started to take delivery of the underlying physical.
Right.
So stay tuned, because when there is a rush to the metals, this next one that looks more like we saw in March and April, I mean, you could see some huge dislocations in the bullion banks.
So it's the COMEX that people are trying to start actually cash out their paper contracts for the actual precious metals.
And the London bullion market as well. Yeah.
And we know there's way more derivatives contracts out there than there are physical assets. So if people start cashing in, it's not going to end up very pretty for anybody. So exactly. Cover your assets.
Fractional reserve system, right? You just keep a little bit of cash, go to the bank and tell the bank you want $10,000. Oh, we don't have $10,000. But didn't they flood the system in March with lots and lots of new bills? There was lots of sequential bills if you went in to get a stack of cash out, which a lot of people did at that time, because the central bank wanted you to know that they could just print as much money. Neil Kashkari was on 60 Minutes, I think it was, saying, yeah, we can just print as much as we want. It's not a big deal. That's our job, man. I mean, it's crazy. But there was a bank run. Well, the same thing is happening in the gold and the silver markets, and it's happening underneath the surface. So if anybody was actually even thinking, well, I should buy some gold and silver, you know, they need to do it now.
Yeah.
Why they have the most choices, even though those choices are becoming limited again, the most choices.
Well, I mean, okay, so the last time I interviewed you, I don't know the specific date, but I want to say it was like the second week of March-ish, maybe towards the end of March. And the price of silver back then, I want to say it was like around the $15 price ounce. Now it's sitting around 28. The last I looked, is it corrected at all? Is it still around 28?
About 27, 28. We had a little correction in the markets yesterday.
That's almost double just from March. You know, so and that's a shorter period of time. So like you're saying, now is the time. Now is the time for everything. If you're gonna bring about change or do anything, now is the time.
Exactly. And you know, here's the other part of that particular piece. Back then, I think with spot somewhere around $15 or something like that, you were paying a premium of maybe, you know, 20 or 22 or something like that. Well, the premiums have gotten a little more narrow, but they're still there. So with spot up, and even at 28, even at 50, even at 100, it's still severely undervalued. And I guess that's part of what I kind of have a little challenge wrapping my brain around with the cryptocurrencies. It's like, what is their utility? What is the function? Transactions, maybe. And, you know, you can transact globally a lot more easily with, you know, with digital than you can, or cryptocurrencies, than you can with physical gold and silver. That's a little bulky. So, you know, there's a place for both. But with physical gold and silver, they are actually used physically across every single avenue of the global economy. So they have 100% utility and the broadest base of buyer.
Right. And it's, I mean, gold and silver has been tested for quite a long time. I mean, there's no refuting what it's done, but we're also talking about the idea, and I mentioned this to you the last interview, that we're running out of a supply of the precious metals. So then when it's too expensive for people, then what do people do? And then you got people looking at cryptocurrencies. And the thing about cryptocurrencies that I'll say is that they're not backed by anything, just like the fiat system since 1971. It's not backed by anything. But the difference in Bitcoin and a dollar is there's a limited supply of Bitcoin. It can't be inflated. That's a good thing. Using Bitcoin also is just taking the power away from fiat money, from governments and from central banks. Just getting away from the system alone, because we can't do that with gold right now. Like, I can't buy things from other people around the world. Like, let's say we have an alternate bartering system with people who choose to utilize these cryptocurrencies. I can't do that same utility with gold and silver because of the fact that it is physical. So I get the idea that you need to hold stuff that's yours, but that's where I've been trying to encourage people to diversify as much as possible and make sure that with the things that you say and the things that I try to say and the people I interview and the people that you interview, that we're providing information that people can make an educated decision that works best for them. You know, and I think that's the best thing that we can do for people. And, you know,
that's why I like you.
And I appreciate you.
Because it really is all about educated choices and the individuals making those choices. These are my circumstance, what's going to support what I'm trying to accomplish. And I do agree, you know, with diversification, 100%. 100%. I agree with that.
Awesome. Well, if you can just bear with me 1 minute, I'm going to wrap things up and then end the broadcast and just talk to you for one quick second. But ladies and gentlemen, I really do appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you really enjoyed this video, make sure you smash that like button, because that helps other people to be able to see this information on YouTube. And I like to think this information is important, and you guys should be sharing this with everybody. So please share this video. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I encourage you to explore my channel and subscribe. I encourage you to check out Lynette Zang's ITM Trading channel as well. I'm going to have links down below for all that. I do encourage everybody to check out my Patreon channel, where I post up exclusive content, and it's a way to support what I do directly. Follow me on LBRY, my sister channel. That's available just in case my YouTube channel gets censored and deleted. And also be sure to check out my brand new audio podcast, Rice Radio. You can find that on anchor.fm, on all major podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more at Rice Radio. And as always, I encourage you to be the change by practicing change.